Welcome to the WAIR Chats podcast, a series where we dive into conversations surrounding all facets of e-commerce and the people working to make it a more sustainable and productive industry for all. My name is Greg Moore, the founder and CEO of WAIR, and your host for today's podcast. The fashion industry is one of the largest polluters and biggest drivers of wasted goods on the planet. Join us as we talk with Jake Disraeli, who went from Indiegogo's leading hype man to fashion's branded resale king. Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Moore. I am the CEO and co-founder of WAIR, and I'm here with Jake today, who is the CEO and co-founder of Treet. Jake, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much, Greg. Great to be here.
Yeah, of course, man. So look, before we get started, we like to talk a lot about e-commerce enablement, and even from like the vendor side, like how do we approach brands and talk about sort of our wares, if you will. And so before we get into all that, I'd love to get to know a little bit more about you. I mean, what were you doing before Treet, and like what kind of brought you to this type of moment for yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. So right before Treet, I was at Indiegogo for the past 4 years, running the launch and sales teams at Indiegogo, the global crowdfunding platform, which was a lot of fun. And we actually did a lot of the similar things to what we're doing at Treet, which is like launching brands on a platform, helping them raise money through pre-orders at that time. Now we're doing it through resale orders with Treet. And even while I was at Indiegogo and before, I've always had like a deep obsession with e-commerce and Shopify, the Shopify environment. And so I've started a couple of my own D2C Shopify brands, everything from like cardboard furniture to travel towels, and also with like the blend of things that overlap with sustainability. And so I studied like entrepreneurship and environmental studies in college. And so I'm like one of the rare breeds of people that actually studied what they actually ended up doing, like startups in sustainability and like environmentalism. And so even the D2C brands that we launched were like something to do with recycled products or items that could be recycled or made with recycled materials. And left Indiegogo to eventually initially was going to be my own circular men's fashion brand that was tech focused to kind of incorporate what we were going to do a little bit with Treet. And eventually, like the kind of classic aha moment was like, oh, we're building this awesome tech, or we're thinking about building this awesome tech. Let's just build the tech to enable any brand to do what we were trying to do and like create a bigger impact overall, and also just a bigger business for us that we can be proud of. And that kind of like led us into building Treet.
That is really cool. I mean, so I have so many questions to go off of that one. We may just sit here for the entire time.
Yeah, happy to.
So, all right, first and foremost with Indiegogo, because that's awesome. What is the craziest brand that you helped launch on that one?
Oh man,
maybe one in a like a what are you trying to do?
There was there were some really wacky products. It was really fun being on the other side of things and just seeing what got funded. I think the most surprising when we were there, the one that we launched was like it was like a peanut butter spreader that like it spread peanut butter really efficiently, and it raised like 150 grand.
Oh my goodness.
That's thousands of these, basically a holder for putting in peanut butter that had like a nozzle so you can spread the peanut butter efficiently. We also launched a pancake bot that was a 3D printer for pancakes.
Oh wow!
So it created, and they actually sent one to the office, and we would create mock-ups of people's faces and like the Indiegogo logo, and we print pancakes in that vein. But honestly, a lot of it was like electric e-bikes, electric scooters, mobility, kind of the classic things like phone chargers. And so like 90% of the things that we launched were like within a couple different realms of items, like a lot of that sort of stuff, and then like the 10 to 15% of wacky, weird things that nobody could guess would actually pop off. It's absolutely absurd.
Oh, that's so much fun. Now, did you have to? I mean, obviously, it's a similar playbook for everything because it's all platform based, right? But like when you got the wacky ones, you're like, oh, dude, we have to take this whole other like go to market strategy for this thing that's like totally off the cuff.
I mean, it depends how hands-on we were. With some big campaigners, like with big companies, we'd actually get pretty hands-on with working with their marketing team. Maybe we'd be the agency or working with the marketing agency that is helping launch them. And so it just depends on like that sort of like level of involvement. Sometimes the wacky ones, we didn't even know they existed until they started popping off.
Yeah.
And so like that was more rare, but that's what would happen. That's what happened to like the peanut butter spreaders. Nobody even talked to this campaigner. And on Indiegogo, like anybody can launch a campaign. Yeah. The team really likes to get involved and help you actually launch the products, but oftentimes things like that, they just pop off, and then you get involved later on. Like, okay, this is how you really get the most out of the campaign. This is how you get your current backers to build community and get there, like build a referral network and referral campaign. This is how you use like the Indiegogo Pixel to run Facebook ads, and all things like that sometimes come in afterwards. Yeah.
That's really
So
cool.
they do the best they can.
Envisioning like you probably heard about this, but like back in the day, Google their main. I mean, this had to be like 12 years ago or something. But they had this huge screen with all the searches that were coming through, and then like they'd rank the searches on a per day basis, and so like they'd sit at the top. I'm just imagining this for Indiegogo. Like maybe it's literally like two columns. One's just like what's the bubble up list of like who's getting the most traction, and the other one's like what's the craziest idea that bubbles to the top.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we would pass our time, basically, of like, I mean, from a sales standpoint, obviously we're curious, like, what are the best, biggest campaigns, who's generating the most revenue? And then we'd have a weekly stand-up where someone would present just a project that nobody has ever heard of.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about the company is there's a lot of really passionate people about like comic books or graphic novels or like nonprofits and these other types of campaigns that weren't raising $1 million, but were still like really meaningful. And those ones get less attention on the front page, but are also still really interesting, cool campaigns that people could help work on and help push and help support like internally at the company, which is cool.
That's awesome. That's really cool. That's a really fun sort of backing to a lot of the experience and your current path and vision. So that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, part of it was also like I will say like there were some really cool, helpful, interesting products that came through Indiegogo and crowdfunding, and that will always be the case. And then there's always just like the 10-in-1 like pocket knife that maybe should exist, maybe shouldn't exist. And then there's a lot of, I would say like, I wouldn't call it like junk, but there's just random stuff out there. There's just a lot of consumerism. And so I had like, it was this weird dissonance of like working with the company to create a lot more things in the world. And also me feeling internally, especially with my background in environmentalism and loving the outdoors, of like, does this thing really need to be created? Is this a necessary thing that we need to produce in China? And also like this is not made to ever be broken apart or repaired or recycled or upcycled. It's like a single use thing. And so it like helped stir in me like my next thing had to be something back in the space of like contributing to a greater good type thing.
That's a really hard juxtaposition where you're trying to figure out like, I mean, consumerism is consumerism, capitalism. You can build whatever you want, and if people want it, great. But is it actually helping the world? Because it does require materials. It does require, probably oil and all sorts of chemicals to produce it, and everything else. And then landfills, if it like is a single-use item or like something that gets thrown away.
Exactly. It's kind of always that back and forth of like, am I creating something meaningful, useful, or is it just creating something that can just be used and then thrown away? And especially being a business, right? Like when you're in business, you have to care about the bottom line and sales and generate revenue. And sometimes that takes precedent over the environment or the greater good. And so like, kind of a constant balance trying to think about those things.
Fair, totally true. So then you move on and you start running your own e-commerce stores. Like, was the driver there that you wanted to learn about the space because eventually you wanted to be more ingrained in this, or was it like, let's just do some side projects and just like make some money in a sense?
Yeah. I mean, I was actually doing those things either before Indiegogo or even while I was at Indiegogo. And they were just like this at different phases. The first one was we really tried to build this business and it didn't end up panning out. The second one was a side project. We like wanted to build a brand, wanted to produce a product. It was a travel towel company made out of fabric that was like recycled plastic water bottles. It was like an outdoor brand. And I did it with my brother and we had a great time doing it and selling hundreds of towels. And honestly, like part of it was we had the excuse of being outdoors and going on like, waterfall hunting adventures and doing photo shoots and things like that. And so it was a great side hobby and also built an even deeper appreciation for how difficult it is to build an e-com brand. It's not the sort of thing where if you build it, they will come. And understanding all the different like e-commerce enablement solutions that we were using, the different tech providers, like the Shopify app landscape, if you will. And so that really did help as we transitioned into Treet, just having like that intimate knowledge of what it was like to really manage an ongoing Shopify store.
Totally. So when you were, I'll pick on this a little bit and then we'll jump over to Treet because I love what you're doing there too. But when you were building out the stores and building out the community for those stores, like what were some of the biggest surprises that you start moving on it, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden, oh, I didn't think about that. And I'm kind of looking at this from the guise of like other e-commerce companies that are like getting into growth phases or into the beginning phases. What are some tips and tricks for them in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, for us, like, there's a couple of things. I would put the buckets of like logistics and operations on one side, and then marketing on the other. And then like where those meet in the middle is
Mm,
kind of magic, right? And so for us, just figuring out logistics and what fulfillment partners to use and the costs of that. I think we were surprised by how expensive it was going to be for us to not do our own fulfillment and to work with
mm,
3PL, but also like how convenient those options were, especially as a side project. And so one of the big decisions we made was to go with the 3PL, which is more of a personal decision for us based on our time versus
yeah.
commitment. And so that was like the first big decision. And it also like cut in deep into our margins as we were launching the business early on. And so if we were to do it again, we would honestly probably start in-house just doing the fulfillment on our own as
Okay.
we got ramped up, because we were in that trap of if we build it, they will come.
Yeah.
So we actually thought we were gonna literally run out of inventory immediately. We're so
Yeah.
excited. We built a pre-launch community, and that's what we did at Indiegogo, and that's what I would preach is to like sell before you even have the item and
Yeah.
build that pre-launch community, build the hype, and so when you launch, you have a lot of momentum. And we did that, but we launched and we sold a lot on day one, and then day 2 and 3 was kind of like crickets.
Mm,
And so we built a system. We like over constructed a system that wasn't really. We had to like grow into it over time,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and we never really got to the point where it was actually efficient. It was actually justifying the cost. We ended up actually pulling out of the 3PL and doing like one-off fulfillment, and that was actually fine for a while.
Okay.
Like every other day, we'd literally go to the post office with like
Yeah.
dozens of files and drop them off.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'll never forget. So my dad started his business right before I went to college, and it was a equal opportunity employment mediation counseling. But he would build these like pamphlets, like these like pretty big booklets for his classes beforehand, and and I'll never forget before a class. I mean, he's just going to the post office with just these like stacks of books to be sent out, and I'm just like, man. I mean, this is back in like the
yeah,
late
yeah.
'90s, right? But I was like, there has to be a better way, and he's like, not one that's cost efficient. And but it kind of goes to that same
Totally.
point, right? Like the volume is it really needs to be there to utilize some of these tools out there to help to create an easier life essentially for the founder.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's just a lot of questions you have to ask yourself to see like, is a 3PL the right decision for me right now? Is it worth the time? Is it worth the cost?
Yeah,
Do I expect to be growing? Do I actually have data that shows that I'm growing in a way to make it effective? And then also like which 3PL do I go with and what system?
yeah, makes a ton of sense. The other thing that you brought up that I thought was really interesting, I'm actually talking to a founder right now about to start their own e-commerce brand. And she has been so focused on product, and like getting it perfectly right, right?
Yeah.
And almost at the demise of community or sort of that pre-launch in a sense. Like how do you recommend balancing those two things, right? Like you have to build a community again for that early stage launch, but you don't necessarily have a product yet, so therefore you can't film and like do all the stuff that you really need. Like how do you balance those things out in the really early stage?
Man, I have a lot to say here because that was basically all Indiegogo. Like the number one way to build a successful Indiegogo campaign, which is literally just it's a launch. And so if you think about Indiegogo just as you're launching something, you can take
Mm-hmm.
all of those methods that you're doing for that launch and apply them to any launch. So I also worked at a marketing launch agency, like part-time running sales for them that was focused on Indiegogo campaigns and other launches. And we use the same practices. And it's like it always comes down to community building and
Yeah.
pre-launch marketing and list building. And so like you can do a lot without a product. You can do so much to build your community. They might not be able to have videos, but they can do prototypes. Like they
Yeah.
can have pictures, they can do mock-ups and prototypes and show the item in action. They can create a launch page with their different value props or the different value props that they think that they should have. And the most important part of that phase is actually making sure you're building the right product. And so being able to, like, if you have money, run ads against
Mm-hmm.
different versions of your product with different communities to understand also what your like ad spend or ROAS is going to be. Start building that community, funnel them into a private VIP Facebook group of passionate people around that space and like have them help you co-create the product with you. And those are the same people that are going to be most excited to buy from you on day one. And so like, I would say you can't afford not to incorporate customer feedback as you're building.
Totally.
And you can build that initial community of those early adopters. They're not going to care that you don't have a product right now. They want to be a part of that journey to help like create the right product for them. And the more that you can involve them in that process, the higher likelihood they're going to actually buy from you on day one.
I love that. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Right? I think that like we did a lot of that with WAIR, especially, and even with Fit3D back in the day when we were starting that business. It was kind of build the groundswell and the need, have constant conversations with your early customers or early adopters to really understand like what you're building to solve that problem, and then start integrating that into the roadmap and into the launch initiatives. So I love that.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, let's switch gears, right? Let's hop over to the nitty gritty of why we're here in a sense. But so you had mentioned at the very beginning this, which I loved, right? Is that you have an education in what you're currently doing, which, as you said, is pretty rare. Um, and so when you were thinking about environmentalism and like how we can start to do things to essentially improve environmentally, improve the earth in a sense, especially from a landfilling perspective, which I think is kind of a big focus. How did you kind of come across Treet and the vision behind Treet in that sense as you were on that journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was an ongoing process of just like thinking about things and how things are built and what things are contributing to what waste and what energy, and deciding that fashion was where I wanted to land. Partly because I like fashion, I like secondhand fashion, and also just partly because fashion is one of the biggest contributors to the greenhouse gases in the world.
Yeah.
It's debated whether it's like second, third, or fourth. It doesn't really matter. It's one of the biggest.
Yeah.
Fashion waste is a huge, huge, huge problem. And when it comes to like circularity and secondhand, there's this shining star of like there's something out there that can actually help with this, and it's trending. And so like brands are going to want to do this, and it's really good for keeping items out of landfill. Like buying a used product reduces its footprint by about 82%, like displaces the need to create a new product. And so more people are buying secondhand, which means like the secondhand community is growing at this insane pace. It's growing like 11 times faster than retail, which is the overall secondhand fashion industry.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's gonna more than 2x in the next 4 years.
Wow. Okay.
And so it's this massive, massive opportunity for us to like do shopping better. And for us, it was like, how can we? The hack is going through the brands. The brands have the most like the best view of who's buying their items and who has their items that can be resold. And we use a ton of that really rich data to be like, okay, brand, you can tell your customers they're going to resell their items anyway. They're going to be doing that. Let's have them sell it with you and create new secondhand shoppers of people that even haven't shopped secondhand or sold secondhand that are now suddenly doing it because they're doing it through a trustworthy brand. And we're making it so easy for them to do it. They can do it from their order history. We pull in stock photos, original pricing, descriptions, kind of make it like a no-brainer for the brands and for their customers. And so that was, I mean, I kind of answered a different question to answer that, but that like it was all about fashion waste and like deciding that was where we wanted to create our impact, and then just doubling down in that. And we've been really focused on like extension of life. So just like making our real mission is just making sure every item that can be resold is resold and lives its longest life possible until its end of life. And we're already starting to talk about different end of life solutions. And we just launched a resale recycling program with 10 Tree last week, I guess, early August. But where we are starting to pair end of life with resale. And so like that's where a lot of the magic happens too, is like, okay, let's make sure every item lives its longest life. And then when it's actually time for this item to like go away, let's make sure that it's upcycled or recycled or rematerialized or broken down or whatever it is, so it can like go back into to be produced for another product and is recycled responsibly. That's really my ambition.
Yeah, there's two things that you said there that I think are really, really interesting. I mean, one is trust, right? If you're buying a secondhand product from any one of the hundreds of marketplaces out there to buy secondhand product, like, I mean, it's just the same thing as we see with Amazon, right? Like, we don't know if the reviews are true or not. We don't know if the product is actually through the vendor or not. But if these things are trusted by the consumer, because they're on the brand site and you know that they're only going to sell their own stuff if that's the case, you've ticked that box, which I think then makes it very palatable in a sense, which is a great idea. I love that concept.
Absolutely. I think that's a big piece of why brands have found success with it and their customers really like it, is it feels like a more elevated secondhand shopping experience than going on a marketplace like Poshmark where there's millions and millions of people. And you scroll through and it kind of feels like a sales rack, like a Ross or something like that. And versus you're on the brand's site, like you see the photos, you see size guides and product descriptions, you just like feel like it's a more elevated experience. It's just way easier to navigate and find the exact items that you're looking for in your right size, et cetera.
Totally. And I think the other thing that I really gravitated towards was the true end of life of a product, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everything produced will eventually get thrown away, right? It's going to end up in a landfill. But the reality is, as you mentioned, like, can we extend that life? And I'll never forget, I was in at a PI apparel event in Milan, I think, or it was in Lugano, but like we flew through Milan, which is great. And I met these guys from, I believe, the Netherlands in there, and they had this jean company called Honestly. And they were doing some of the most amazing stuff with recycled clothing, right? Where they would take the threads. They'd have like these donation centers all over Europe. People can drop in their old jeans in there. They would take the stuff out. They basically tear out the fibers of everything. And then they'd rebuild them back up into their jeans. And then when they rebuilt them up into their jeans, they really thought about, all right, the rivets, for example, can't be replaced, right? So let's not use rivets, right? Let's use thread that can then be replaced. I mean, they just put so much mind thought into how to create a second life for these products that would just end up dead.
The inception of the product is where it really starts. So actually, like thinking about the materials that go into the item and making sure those items can be recycled afterwards or safely like upcycled or whatever it is. But almost the easy part and like the low lift part is extension of life. And so that's where brands can have like an easy win to be more sustainable and more, I like emphasis on more circular. It doesn't make you a circular brand, but you can extend life. And I think about WAIR the same way in terms of like, what are these really great, impactful things that a brand can do from a sustainability perspective that also like they don't take years to change their supply chain or things to change around. It's like, what is like the checklist of things that they can do to create the biggest impact now? I think size guides and making sure that people are getting the right sizes the first time, reducing returns, and all of the packaging and the waste and all of like the emissions that are in the shipping space. Same thing. It's like, there's probably like 5 different things from like carbon offsetting, better size guides, resale, and probably a few more. Maybe we need to create like a sustainability stack or something like that. But you do as like this is what we should be doing at the very minimum to reduce our impact, reduce our carbon emissions, and then let's also at the same time think about what are the rivets that go into our jeans, the materials, and start using more like eco-friendly materials. What is the water production of our denim? All that stuff.
I love that. I mean, I think that's, when you talk to a lot of the larger brands that are out there, they have these innovation groups that are really looking like 5, 7, 10 years in the future, right? And a lot of times they'll forget that some of this problem can be solved today. And I think then, when they have that mindset, the challenge is that then basically for the next 7 years, you're doing exactly what you're doing. You're creating no betterment or no positive impact. And then hopefully your moonshot idea actually works, right? And I love the concept. I mean, I think you and I talked about this last week a little bit, but the concept of having like, here's your sustainability stack, and here are all the different things that you can do. And like, this is going to have this little impact. This is going to have this little impact. This is going to have this little impact. And if you deploy all of it, here is the collective impact that can have, and you can do it like that. And then you keep your innovation team focusing on the future-facing initiatives that are those moonshot concepts. Like, I love that as a concept of like incrementalism leading to innovation in a sense, which is so powerful.
No, absolutely. And there's like a saying that gets tossed around in this space a lot, which is progress over perfection. Just like improve, do these little things, and over time that leads to a really significant impact overall.
Totally agreed. So as you guys are building, what are some of the ways that you have used to get the word out, right? How are you attracting customers or prospects to you guys so that you can have your mission discussions and your sales consultations?
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of like we have a sales team that is reaching out to the brands that we think would be great partners with Treet, and those are brands that like have high quality items. We're focused on apparel accessories, bags, footwear, etc. And so like on the hunt for great brands that we can work with. And a lot of brands come to us, especially because we've launched with great brands. We're building our repertoire. We power resale for over 50 brands. Some of the best, like we think some of the best brands, like in the kids space, brands like Riley and Crew, Quincy May, and Doppel. In the men's space, like Pistol Lake, and Cuts, and Helm, and then a ton in the women's fashion space, like also like Boyish Jeans for sustainable denim, Whimsy and Row. Like, the list goes on and on. And a lot of brands follow what other brands are doing, and they're like, oh hey, you have this resale program. It says powered by Treet on it, or it has Treet in the URL. Like, let's have a conversation with these guys, and that's been really helpful. Is just like getting out there fast. The fact that we can launch a site in under a day, we can launch an entire resale experience and fully integrated, fully branded experience for brand.
That's cool. I didn't know it was that fast.
Yeah. It's we spent a year building a platform that we can stand up in a day. Yeah. And so, but because we can do that, we launch a lot of brands every month. And because we launch a lot of brands, other brands see that and their customers see that. And now their customers are asking them about Treet too and about resale. It's probably like the coolest thing that's happened in the last year is brands are coming to us and saying, hey, our customers have been asking for this. Cool. That's awesome. And then we're like, okay, that's great. This has happened like a year ago, but it's happening now. Yeah. And that's been really fulfilling.
Makes total sense. I think we always sort of want it faster, but as CEOs, like, sometimes we'll forget about the evolution required to get to where you are. It's like, oh, if I would have just done this, and this, like maybe this could have been sooner. It's like, it just had its
had to learn those lessons, had to go that path, had to build the education, and totally. But I agree. I feel we're always like faster, like grow, and but things do take a natural progression. Sometimes you can only go so fast.
Totally. It's funny. We see a very similar growth pattern where a lot of our opportunity is inbound, right? And it's exactly that, the boosted by WAIR. And it's funny because like we took a really strong stance in the very beginning, whereas like we don't want to take over the site, right? We don't want to have so much attribution that the shopper forgets that they're on the site that they're shopping at. But at the same time, what we've also found is that when like the Powered by WAIR logo is there, that our usage rate and conversion rate and success rate actually goes up, right? Because now these shoppers realize that this isn't just something that was spun up to help them, on a willy-nilly basis by a brand. This is something that a company dedicates their life towards. And it was really interesting for us to see that transition, not only in the positive of like us as the customer, as the vendor, but then also the shoppers. And I was wondering if you guys experienced that same thing.
Honestly, I haven't thought about it like that before. I could see that same thing playing out here, where the shoppers are on a Treet powered site and they know it's Treet, and oftentimes they already have now a Treet account, and so they're able to log in with their same email address. And part of how we've thought about it, especially with why the brands love it, is they see this as like in partnership with Treet. This is a little different than a regular, I would say even than a WAIR, just another Shopify app. Is like a lot of the brands actually want Treet to be a little bit more present, because they want us to like take care of things. And so like, we do support, we do disbursements, we do payout, like anything goes wrong, it's kind of on us. They're not adding a new support muscle on their team. And so they have a little bit of brand distance. They're like, oh, in partnership with Treet, also like our trusted resale partner who is like trusted platform. And then maybe that's where it overlaps a little bit with what you're saying, is like this company dedicates themselves to resale. They're here for you. They're building the best resale tech. It's trustworthy. And by the way, we're working directly with them in partnership. And so it's very trusted and it feels like our brand too.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. So, all right, we're kind of coming up on time here, but I have two more questions I want to ask. So when you think about the future of Treet and even maybe the future of sustainability in e-commerce, like what do you think are some of the biggest roadblocks that your company and the vision behind it are going to face?
Yeah, I'll tell you, like, I think just the biggest issue with secondhand is getting more people to participate in it, making it easy, making it seamless, making it a no-brainer. And so one of the things that also, we have a lot of sayings, I guess, but the other one is like making secondhand feel firsthand for brands and their customers around the world. And so like the easier that we can make secondhand, the more approachable we can make it. the more people will participate, the bigger impact that we can create in the world. There's a big portion of the population that has never bought a second item, even like how quickly secondhand is growing. There's still a huge percentage of the population that hasn't shopped secondhand or sold anything secondhand. And that's where it's really interesting for us to be like, how can we get those people? And there's a little bit of friction with the selling process. And so our goal is to make it easier and easier, like as quick as possible and easy and so seamless to sell a product. It's going to be just as easy as like selling a product as it is to buying a product.
Yeah.
And so we're really focused on that selling journey to make that as quick and easy as possible. And that's part of like the friction point that we're always working on and trying to speed up our selling process. We're using AI. We get to integrate with the brand, so we're able to have a lot of benefits from that perspective, and just make that the best experience we can.
That's awesome. I love that. I mean, one of the things I think I appreciate more and more as my tenure in entrepreneurship continues to grow is amazing entrepreneurs have thought through a tremendous amount of their business, right? It's not just I have a product that I want to sell. It's like, how is this going to impact the shopper? How is this going to impact the customer? How is it going to impact the business, right? Like, and then all the different ways. And then at the same time, there's this adaptability lens that comes through it that every single day you're learning, right? And so those transitions are always sort of shifting in a sense, but there's always sort of this core North Star.
Yeah.
And I hear that coming through more and more in this conversation. I respect
that.
Yeah.
We know what our thing is. We just need to build the things to get there and to help gravitate towards that. Yeah. That's right. And it's really helpful too, like from just a team mission standpoint, we're all aligned on what the end goal is. Now we just have to align on what are those specific KPIs that we need to focus on, what features do we need to align on to get us there, to get us to that end goal.
Yeah, totally. Okay, last question. So, obviously work-life balance is really important. And then also being a CEO is it's not a 40-hour week job, right? You're nuts, as is most startup positions, frankly. But what do you do to help to balance things out such that you can maintain your level of focus when you need to during your work week?
Yeah, I will say to be like totally transparent, I think I waver a bit in being really great at work-life balance and not so great. And finding that stasis where I'm actually just great all the time is kind of what I'm now trying to find, to be honest. I would say when I'm best at being present at work and just like happy and healthy in my whole life, basically my routine is work out every single morning at least 20 minutes. So wake up pretty early, get a really good night's sleep. I'm pretty anal about like being in bed reading by like 9:30 or 10. And so prioritizing that, I know that my body needs that. And so not every CEO can go and like into the wee hours of the morning. I know that like that's when I need to get my rest. I wake up pretty early, work out, meditate, drink a giant smoothie. And
not any smoothie, a giant smoothie.
Oh, it's a huge smoothie. It's my fiance makes fun of me just like every single day. It's like this giant.
I'm just assuming it's like a big gulp of the smoothie.
Yeah. And I just chug that thing down.
That's awesome.
And so it's like part of that routine of just making sure that it's like a lot of health in the morning helps me throughout the day. And actually, what I started doing even this week is I noticed that once you start your day, it's like pretty intense. As a CEO, you are always wearing so many hats, and it's like always a juggle to take one hat, put it on somebody else, take another hat, and then you get like a hat back when somebody goes on vacation. And it gets really insane. Like you're fundraising, you're team building, you're selling, you're working with you're having one-on-ones. And so it can just be pretty hectic. And so for the past week, I've also been taking like a midday meditation and doing like a 10-minute breathing exercise to get like back to normal essentially. And then also I keep my Saturdays as hopefully like sacred Saturdays. Okay. So ideally on Saturdays, I try to get outside. And so like for me to recharge every single Saturday, I try to prioritize, like I'm going on a hike, I'm going on like a city walk, doing something outside to help recharge. Cause I know that I'll work Sundays and I just work Sundays. It's just what you do. But Saturdays, like having at least one day of break has been really necessary and to recharge.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think that, context switching, you hear about like I was an engineer in my prior life, right? And anytime you're context switching, like you totally lose focus on whatever you're on. And if you don't create the appropriate bookends to be able to do that, you lose so much in that transition. So I love the fact that you're cognitive about taking that time rebalance everything. I think that's definitely a word for the wise in that sense.
Yeah.
But
thanks, Greg. Yeah, I mean, again, the caveat there is like not always that great. That's kind of perfect. And sometimes I am there consistently. Sometimes I fall off. I just need a reminder. And it's helpful to talk to other entrepreneurs and to like remind myself of what they're doing, get these tips, and try to integrate them to try to be as best as we can. Because at the end of the day, like our mental health is like very important, and it like directly correlates to the health of the company.
Totally.
How you're able to problem solve, how you're able to interact with the team, and then move the company forward. And so if we're failing, our company is going to fail to be the most dramatic.
Yeah, absolutely, and it makes total sense in that regard. Look, Jake, this was awesome, man. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate the conversation. I know that we will have many more of these conversations, probably not on camera, but we'll definitely make it happen. And I love what you guys are doing, and really happy to be a part of that sustainability push as we move the industry forward. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I love it.
Likewise, Greg. Great to chat. Probably chat with you next week. Excited for a lot more partner stuff in the future.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, sir. You have a great day.